All right. Good morning again, everybody, and welcome. So today I'm going to talk about, for the first time, probably directly what's advertised on the website. It says, when I don't know what I'm going to talk about, which is most of the time, it says suffering and the end of suffering. If you look at the content, which would have said, I think suffering and the end of suffering. And normally, like a day or two beforehand, I'll think something will come up and I'll change it. And it's just today I haven't changed it. Suffering and the end of suffering. So that's what I'm going to talk about. Buddha taught two things, very simple. I teach about dukkha, stress, suffering, unsatisfactoriness, and the end of it. I'm going to talk about what that means at a practical level that we can do something. Hopefully we can do something. It's a very different teaching than what he had in mind when he started his spiritual journey. He left because he said, how am I going to deal with sickness, old age, and death? And he thought he had to go get something. He went and he studied. He went and he studied with a couple of teachers in particular who were well-recognized teachers at the time. And they were practitioners who taught very deep meditation states. But it was a cultivation of those meditation states. It was an intention to go and achieve certain states and find what's in those mental states. And what the Buddha found, then Siddhartha, what he found was that when he reached that place and he talked to the teacher afterwards and said, okay, this is what I'm experiencing. Yes, you've got it, that's it. You want to come sit next to me? You're as good at this as I am. You co-teach with me. So, thanks, but that's not what I'm looking for. It's just not it. And what he came to realize, he then went off and he did all these extreme ascetic practices, and he said, something's not right here. I'm missing something. And then he had a memory. And the memory, you've probably all heard the story, but the memory is of the rose apple tree. This is a childhood memory. It's not clear from the story, from the canon, how old he was, whether he was just, 7 years, 15, it's just not clear. But the essence of it is, that he remembered when he was a young person, a lovely day, much like today, sitting outside in the fields, birds and bees around making their little birds and bee kind of noises. Very pastoral, lovely environment. And he was just sitting there, nothing to do, nowhere to go. And he just felt relaxed and he settled into the state of peace. And that's described as being he entered the first jhana, for what it's worth. So that's all that points at is he wasn't just sitting there staring and saying, that's a bluebird, that's a robin. He was very settled, very stable in a very peaceful place. This is pointing at the truth that I'm looking for. This is pointing at it, is what he concluded. And so the distinction between what he'd been doing and this is a state I know I've experienced this many times in the world, and I suspect all of us have experienced this kind of thing. It can be sitting under a rose apple tree, it can be sitting in a field, it can be on the beach, it can be just going for a walk on a lovely day. It's a sense of peace. It's a sense of letting go of the noise and distraction of our life, letting go of our stresses, and allowing the peace that is already there to become present and be noticed. Already there. All we've got to do is let the noise go away. So it's a very different approach. It's an approach of not seeking something, but of letting go. Ajahn Chah talks about this. He talks about this a lot, but one of the things that I particularly liked that Ajahn Chah said was let go a little bit of peace. Let go a lot of peace. Let go completely, complete peace. It's not go do something, enter this jhana state, find this. It's let go completely. He also talks about this. Another thing I like to talk about. He said, "See that rock over there?" Talking to his monks, and you think that's heavy? Oh yes, I think it's very heavy. Wouldn't be if you didn't pick it up. You pick it up, and if you're carrying it, notice you're carrying it, put it down. That's the heart of the practice. Something that is implicit in what I've said, but I'll make it explicit. The Buddha's first teaching, as you all know, was the Four Noble Truths. But maybe the first thing he said was actually the first three sutras in the Udana, if you go back to that. And these are basically articulating dependent arising. It's the first one is articulating dependent arising as the nature of existence. The second one is articulating unpacking dependent arising, releasing it link by link, as how we really release ourselves. And the third one is going up and down. But apropos, so that was the truth, that was the letting go that we're talking about. That's how he formulated it. And that's at the heart of all of Buddha's teachings, is that structure, all the Pali Canon teachings, that structure as a way to let go, to see through that structure. Within that, there's one of the key links. You go from sort of feeling tones, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, to craving. Ooh, I like this. To claim, this is mine. And that's the link. Somebody said to Buddha one time, so you talked about this craving thing, and now you're moving on to this clinging thing. Who is it that clings? Buddha's answer was, that's not a well-formulated question. I didn't say somebody craves. If I'd said somebody craves, then it would have been legitimate to ask, so who clings? I didn't say somebody craves. I said, with the arising of craving comes the arising of clinging. There's no me, you, there's no person in there. It's just the arising of clinging. So this piece that we're talking about, it's not, this is one of the things about that Rose Apple story. There's no me in there enjoying it. It's not, I've got this film, isn't this nice? Look at this, look at the noise of this. There's no me in that story. It's with craving arises clinging. So now we get to something like the very practical teaching. So what do we do with this? Well, one of the, there are so many different approaches to the Buddhist teaching, so many different schools of Buddhism. One of the things I particularly like about the Theravadan tradition and the Pali Canon is it steps through kind of a graduated approach. It's like baby steps, go little by little. It's analytical. There's a risk there, which you can get really nerdy, really analytical, right? But it's useful to have these steps. Step one, generosity. Not something our culture does especially well. It's not to say it doesn't happen, and it's not to say there aren't people who are extremely generous, but cultural generosity is not something we do very well. Generosity is giving something that matters. If it's like, oh, I've got a bunch of old books and a bunch of old clothes and maybe some children's toys, and I just want to get rid of them, let me take them down to Goodwill, and because those would be good for other people. You're just handing off your problem to somebody else. That's what you do. Yes, there's good that comes out of it, but fundamentally, you're just getting rid of the problem. And a lot of generosity, a lot of what we think of generosity can be tokenism. You know, somebody standing on the street corner with a sign, you wind the window down, you pull a couple of dollar bills out, look the other way until you feel the tension of them going, wind it up and drive off. It's just tokenism. Right? True generosity is giving something that matters. And the reason this is a foundational practice, we're starting to take down barriers. We're starting to let go. If it's something that matters to me that I give, there's a letting go. And there's a letting go of a string of connection to this thing that matters to me. Maybe even more fundamentally, in that act of generosity, we start to open up connection with other people or with other animals or with the environment, wherever we're giving. And in this opening up, we're taking down, we're letting go of the boundary that separates this thing I think of as a me with what I think of as everything else. We start to move into the no separation. Generosity is a really important foundational practice. And it takes us into this rose apple tree story. I've told many of you, I won't bore you with it again because it's not central, many of you have heard it, but I have a story about giving my dad a clarinet for Christmas one year. And it was one of the most moving things in my life. It wasn't, nobody's ever given me anything that I quite like the gift I gave somebody else. And so this is the starting to feel that peace, that openness. We can start to feel that through acts of true generosity. It's a really important place to start. A really important practice to cultivate. It's something we can all do. You could leave here today and you could say, okay, that really rang true. I really need to start being generous, and I know I've not been generous. I think I'm generous, but I know there's something missing here. Let me spend an hour thinking right now what I can do that will be a really kind, generous act. And then I'm just going to go do it. And it could be to go to the ATM, get out $1,000 and go stand on a street corner and give it away $20 at a time to anybody who walks past. We each find what it is for us, but being generous, being truly generous is something we can cultivate, and it really is something that opens up the peace that we're all here today to find. I said the wrong word, not to find, to allow to flourish. So the second step is then the precepts, it's virtue. We're going to talk about this more next week, because it's precepts, really our precepts every Sunday. But the precepts, broadly, they're the next step in that continuum. The precepts are the practical, the training precepts, the 5 or the 10. They're don't kill, don't steal, don't engage in sexual misconduct. I mean, they're longer words, but they're these kind of things. And these are act in a way that does not cause harm. First and foremost, does not cause harm. So we're conscious of whether we're causing harm to this and to everything out there. And they're also constructed in a way that if we really look at them, we're actually doing good. Actually healthy behavior. Healthy behavior that actually doesn't just not cause more dukkha, it reduces dukkha. So we're starting to move into intentionally cultivating skillful behavior that reduces dukkha and does not increase dukkha. And what that does, and you can feel this again, this is rose apple tree experience. I had a conversation with somebody very recently who was, they won't mind telling you the story, so you can figure out who this is, I'm sure, but they were really concerned about DragonCon because it's a really important part of their life. But this is somebody who's been a bit of a party person, so drinking and wild times, and I don't want to do that. They said. And by relying on the precepts, really relying on the precepts and the truth that I'm talking about how the precepts inform our lives, how they bring us this rose apple tree peace, this person went through DragonCon, really actively participated in, with friends who were drinking and partying and having a good time. And they had a wonderful time. Wonderful time. And they came away realizing that they had experienced this kind of peace there. It's a really, really powerful practice. So all we're doing, we could talk about Buddhism as we're going to wake up, but we can also talk about it in this stepwise, because not everybody comes here wanting to wake up. They just want their life to be just a little bit better. And it offers that in these steps. So living with the precepts, practicing the precepts, gives us openings into this arising of peace, arising of calm. And it takes so much stress away. If we intentionally and consciously are not doing things that we know cross boundaries, we never regret anything. We never worry about what we've done. We never worry about consequences. It just brings stress down. Mindfulness. Mindfulness supports both of the things I've just talked about. Mindfulness is being present, is noticing what's going on. If we're not really noticing what this sack of skin and bones is doing, we're not going to be very good at regulating whether it's following the precepts or not. So cultivating mindfulness, cultivating awareness of what this stack of skin and bones is doing is important. And that takes us into the next big step is meditation. Once you, so do all that, and that'll make your life really, really good. If you never meditate, but you do those things, you'll have a happy life. You can make it even happier. Meditate. Meditation allows calming and it allows insight. Allows us, if we bring our mindfulness into meditation, the level of settlement that can happen in meditation is so much greater than the level of meditation that can happen when you're sitting here having a conversation, when you're going for a walk in the woods. The level of settlement and the level of calm, and therefore the extent to which this peace can be exposed, its natural state. Its natural state can be exposed. Nisargadatta is he's a self-realized Hindu mystic from the, he died in, I think, 1985, something like that. And his name, Nisargadatta, roughly natural state, right? And he named himself, he was named after the natural state. And that's what we're talking about. This peace of God, which passeth all understanding, is the natural state. All we've got to do is get out of the way and it's there. So in meditation, things can calm down a little more and this natural state can start to be exposed to them. And along the way, while we're in this more calm state, we have greater clarity on what's going on. We can see more clearly. We can spot our habit patterns that cause us and others so much harm, so much suffering. So meditation is a compassionate practice, obviously here, but also in the world, because it allows us to see through all those habit patterns from a lifetime of training ourselves, a lifetime of being invisibly trained, right? We don't see it happening. And if you believe these teachings, I don't know how many countless lifetimes of being trained. So we can see through that training and we can start to break down the habit patterns, stop doing some of the things that cause us and others so much harm. A lot of them are just recurrent mental patterns that are just invisible to us until you really settle down. Also coming out of meditation, we can look at metta practice. Metta practice where we recite these basic lines. May you be free of harm, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be free, something along those lines. Typical doses to self, to different groups of people outside. Those are just a beautiful practice. They go to something else as well, which is kindness. You can say, well, but the Dalai Lama said my practice is kindness. And that's right. All this is about is kindness. At one level, kindness is, if you just practice kindness, you're done. Because that is, if you practicing kindness is truly, deeply wanting everyone, every animal, everything, wanting nothing but happiness, everyone. That's what kindness is. That's what metta practice is. The challenge, of course, is there's a lot of people who think they're being kind. I know, for much of my life, I've been one of them. I think I'm being kind. But there's so much me in this story that I don't see. It's a real obstacle to truly being kind. It's always a conditional kindness or a kindness with a payback here. So kindness is a wonderful practice and it's a wonderful objective, but kindness also really needs this kind of intentionality, some form of practice. And it can be this structure, it can be another structure, but this structure works starting with generosity, then the precepts, and so forth, as a framework to allow us to settle down and cultivate kindness, not just think we're being kind. The last thing I'll say about meditation is that most of the time in meditation, we're just simply following our breath. That's our object of meditation. Now, you can start with lots of different things. You can have a line from scripture, you can have an image, sort of visualization practice. There are lots of ways of doing this, but most of the time, people come back in some form of breath practice. But one of the objects of meditation that is talked about in much Buddhist scripture, in the Pali Canon, in many of the Mahayana sutras, are variations on the three refuges. So taking the Buddha as an object of meditation, taking refuge in the Buddha and allowing that to be your object of meditation, taking a particular sutra, which is the Dharma, as the object of meditation. In the Sangha, which Buddha told Ananda is the whole of the practice. When Ananda came to him and said, getting it, boss, this is half of it. He said, no, it's all of it. Sangha is all of it. You can take that as an object. That actually, and I think quite interesting, takes us into something that grew up in China, and then became a big practice in Japan, was that's really a practice of keeping in mind, taking the Buddha internally as your object of meditation. It's keeping the Buddha in mind, and keeping in mind is very close to and linguistically ends up sort of meshing into chanting. So chanting grows directly out of the three refuges in this sense. All of the Namo Amida Buddha, Pure Land chant, Namo Amida 2 or 4, comes directly out of keeping the Buddha in mind, which is taking refuge. So chanting is another powerful practice. If anybody chants, that really helps them settle down in a very powerful way. So the goal that Buddha was teaching, the endpoint goal is probably wrong. The endpoint that Buddha was teaching, and when he came up with this body of teachings and came into the world, was complete release. Let go a little bit of peace. Let go a lot of peace. Let go completely, complete peace. That's complete release. It's not, I'm one with God. It's not, I've got the truth. It's complete release. Now, none of us are going to walk out of here today, or maybe we will. Wouldn't it be wonderful if it happened? But I doubt if anybody walks out today and then they see the sun and it's just like, oh, complete freedom. Wow. But if we use this, the idea of freedom and release as the framework for our practice, and we think of these as technologies or techniques we're using, generosity, the precepts and so forth, that allow us to let go a little, and we tune into the kind of peace that allows, that arises when we start engaging in these practices. That's setting a path for our practice, and it's allowing a feedback where we can feel the reward of that path in the peace that is being revealed here, the peace that is emerging as the quality of this lived experience.